Welcome, sports fans, to the latest S&M production of the Sunday Night Sports Nerd Show. It is the most absurd 90 minutes of anything goes, smack talk, and a whole lot more. Every Sunday night, the sports nerd joins forces with three charismatic co-hosts who are a select group of sports nerds with attitude, better known in Nerd Nation as the Rampant. We are four of the most loudmouth, smack-talking nerds around, coming at you with some sick rips and rants, which may be just enough to make you pee your pants. So listen up, Nerd Nation. Let's ride and welcome the legend himself. He is the founder, he is the host, and he is the star of the Sports Nerd Show. Coming to you live, straight out of Lakeland, Florida, Scott, the Sports Nerd. Right.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Sports Nerds. We are.
Well, there you have it, Nerd Nation. Another Sunday episode of the Sports Nerd Show.
Oh, here we go with the technical difficulty.
There you go.
Oh, you gotta love it.
USA #1.
Count on it. Book it.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Sports Nerds. I am the Sports Nerd, and joining me tonight are my unusual co-hosts, Mr. Eliot Biggie Lamba, Mr. Bills Mafia himself, Mr. John G. Olson, and of course, who are them Cowboys, Mr. Ken Koslow. And of course, and then joining us tonight for the first half hour, maybe longer, we'll see what happens, Mr. Derek Lofland, our NFL guru for the past multiple years and years and years. We are going to be talking about Aaron Rodgers, probably Jackson, probably NFL draft. So we'll see what happens with that. And then at the top of the hour, we'll be joined by Mr. Ron Gallo to talk about the NHL playoffs, which will begin in a couple of days. So we're looking forward to it. Mr. Lofton, we want to say thank you, as always, for joining us. I see you representing Chicago with the Blackhawks hat and sweater. Yeah. I know we're going to get into that, but we'll get into it later. I want to talk to you about Jonathan Toews, of course.
Yes, that's why I wore. That's why I wore it. And I knew you had Ron on.
Eliot has a question, or are you doing the Vulcan symbol of live long and prosper? What's up, Eliot?
I can do that as well.
Oh, multi-talented.
I just have one question before we begin. Who in the blue hell is Chosen Anderson?
That is the artist formerly known as Robbie Anderson. He's changed his
Are
name.
you kidding me? That's who it is?
After that,
Dude, that's so funny. I'm sitting there the entire time going, Chosen Anderson is signed with the Dolphins. And I'm like, they're like making a big deal about it. I'm like, who the hell is that? I've never heard of this guy. That's Robbie and wow.
Me and you were in the same boat, John.
Bro, I had no idea.
Yeah, I didn't know who Chosen Anderson was either. Never heard of him. So I mean, it's like, who the heck is this
I
guy?
saw it the other day and it said Robbie Chosen Anderson. And I go, well, okay.
That's hilarious.
well, I mean, when you get accused of saying to the cops what he said he was going to do to that cop's wife, I changed my name. But that was a couple of years ago. So, do you guys remember that story?
Chosen Anderson. Yikes. They're gonna pick on that one for sure.
He got pulled over by the cops and he threatened to do something in the cop's wife's eye that would be sexual in nature.
Oh, skull. Yep. Okay.
Oh,
yeah.
so he's a dipshit.
Yes.
A little skull penetration. I get it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, not necessarily something else, but I don't want to go down that road.
Exactly. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. But yeah, Chosen Anderson is now a member of the Miami Dolphins.
And nobody cares.
And nobody cares.
Biggest news of the day.
Yeah, dude, that's so funny.
It was nice joining you guys.
Yeah, I know. That's it. That's all you need to say, man. That was great. The artist formerly known as Robbie. I love it.
I like that. The artist formerly known. Yes.
Chosen Anderson. Oh my
yes,
God.
I love it. All right. So, Derek, the reason we brought you on, there's a couple of things. We're going to save the Green Bay issues for later.
Okay.
The quarterback situation in Baltimore with Jackson. Are you of the same opinion that most other reporters and pundits are saying that the Deshaun Watson deal is the reason why the Ravens haven't paid him yet?
Yes. I mean, I think there's a couple layers to the story. So I think where the Ravens are to blame in this to a certain extent is they don't want to give him a guaranteed contract because he's injury prone. He's missed 10 games the last 2 years.
Right.
But the reason he's injury prone is because Greg Roman was a moron running their offense and had this guy running the ball 130 times.
It's a double-edged sword is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, so you can't go and run the guy 130 times a year and then he breaks down and gets hurt and you're like, oh my God, he's injury prone. It's like, well, no, he's not injury prone. The offensive scheme you're having him run makes him more susceptible.
So they're treating him the same way the Bills are treating Josh Allen is what is
Hey. You gotta let Josh be Josh.
Where
I knew they would ruffle the feathers of Mr. Olsen. That's why I did that.
Where I think LaMar is to blame, I don't necessarily fault them for not having an agent. There's been plenty of guys that haven't had agents. Grant Hill didn't believe in having an agent, but he had an attorney that represented him to review the contracts. LaMar doesn't have an attorney. He doesn't have an agent. He doesn't have anybody other than his mom that's representing him. And when you're trying to close a couple $100 million deal, you need competent representation that can advise you on the situation. And this contract that Deshaun Watson is in, it's a non-starter. And it's not the first time this has happened. There are outlier contracts all the time. Nazi Amawa from the Raiders in 2007 signed a 3-year, $48 million contract with Al Davis at the end of his tenure that was just completely outside the norm of the cornerback market. Yeah. And that's why Revis was holding out in New York, and that's why there were a number of high-profile corners after that, because the rest of the league said, we're not doing that. And if you look at Jalen Ramsey's deal that he just signed with Miami, it's comparable to what was signed back in 2007. That's how much of an outlier contract that was back then. And the rest of the owners are just like, we don't care that the Browns gave that to Deshaun Watson. We're not following suit. And I think Lamar Jackson's cost himself a lot of money because, like you talked with Josh Allen, he went and signed that contract extension a couple of years earlier. He's already got $85 million in career earnings, and that's not counting what he's going to get paid this year. Lamar's still at 30.
Right. Now, does the OBJ signing change anything?
I don't think so. He's going to have to move on that fully guaranteed number. And the reason he doesn't want to go with that, well, the Ravens don't want to pay that, go and look at Mahomes' contract. It's a 10-year contract for $450 million, but because of the way it's set up, his cap number is about $45 million this year. Right. Deshaun Watson, they had to restructure that contract to get him down to $19 million for the year so that they can sign other players. But the cost of doing that is he's got a cap number of $63 million each year for the next 3 years. He's going to be 25% of their cap. Watson's staying at $45 million. No owner is going to want to put themselves in cap hell like the Browns are going to be with that contract.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I wasn't a big fan of the Watson signing. I mean, the talent-wise, yes, but not with the other issues that he's got going on. But
and Kirk Cousins signed a fully guaranteed contract 3 years ago, and that hasn't worked out for Minnesota either. It's been a bad contract.
What do you want to say, Eliot? Go ahead.
Or leave it to Cleveland.
Right, leave it to Cleveland. Okay, yeah.
You're talking
leave
about
it
Lamar.
to Cleveland to screw up,
the pooch,
team and anything else that they can possibly.
Yes.
You're talking about Lamar and his mother, more or less representing him. Reminds me of that Stallone movie a few years ago. Stop or my mom will shoot.
Have you seen his website, that apparel number 8? It looks like some high school kid designed the thing. It's not a professional looking website. I just don't understand when you're a face of a franchise that can get millions and millions of dollars in endorsement. Why are you running your own apparel company and having unqualified people make the website? Why are you selling beach gym equipment? Why are you? He needs to have somebody that tells him, hey, I know you want a fully guaranteed contract. I know you think you're better than Deshaun Watson. This is bad economics. This is not good for your checkbook. This is why you should do this. And he needs to put his pride aside and get a contract done. Because I think the Ravens would pay him, but not a fully guaranteed contract. They're not going to do it.
So what would have possessed, besides the obvious, which is he wasn't going to get this kind of money anywhere else, obviously, why would Odell go to Baltimore when there's nothing there.
And there's no guarantee Lamar's going to be there either. I mean, he's already said that when he signed. He said he wasn't given any kind of guarantee.
It was all about the money, right?
It was all about the money, and I don't think there was much of a market for him. And that contract's ridiculous too. But a 5-year contract because they put 4 ghost years onto it because they had to keep the $30 million there for LaMar, and then whatever they're going to give for a contract extension. But it's a crazy contract.
Yeah, they ain't getting LaMar for $30 million. They could cut that out.
Yeah.
Right.
So I mean, I think LaMar just wanted to get paid, and I think and that's what an agent does for you too. Is if you they probably told Odell, look, you sat there last year and had a $20 million number, and no one was willing to pay it. You missed the year, and either you got to sign for this, or you're not gonna be playing anywhere at a price you want.
I'm all for the 49ers breaking the bank and getting Lamar Jackson. That would be nice.
You know what though? I don't foresee a trade in the future either, because
nobody needs to trade for him. All you need to go is negotiate with him and sign him to the contract. But nobody else wants to give him the fully guaranteed money, and nobody wants to go and negotiate with him if they think the Ravens are going to match. Because then you're going to have a situation where your starting quarterback is upset, and you're going to have to deal with the fallout of having negotiated with Lamar Jackson.
In the odd chance someone does give him a fully guaranteed contract, there's no team in the league. There's no team. If someone tries to trade him and offers him a fully guaranteed contract, there's no way the Ravens are going to match it anyway. So he would go somewhere else.
Well, right, and I know you guys don't want to talk too much about cap numbers and finances and stuff like that and escrow accounts, but when you do a $230 million contract, you have to send all that money into escrow for the league to hold on to it. So when Haslam went and signed Watson to that contract, he had to cut a $230 million check to the front office. If you go and do, even if the money's fully guaranteed, if it's like Aaron Rodgers' contract or Derek Carr's where it becomes due on a certain day of the league year, you don't have to send the money in until that day of the league year. So you're going to have to find an owner that's going to want to tie up $200 and some odd million in an escrow account. And that's the other thing that's making it complicated, because these owners are billionaires. They didn't get to be billionaires by having $230 million sitting accounts on the sideline doing nothing.
Right.
And so it's not good business that way either. I mean, that's the problem he's running against. Some of these owners that aren't as cash heavy as the bigger owners, they might love to get into the LaMar sweepstakes, but do they have the money? Like Jim Irsay. I don't know what Jim Irsay's net worth is, but does he want $230 million sitting in New York?
Side note, Jim Irsay is a good follow on Twitter if you don't follow already. He's a really good follow.
Isaiah McKenzie, speaking of the Colts, is a good follow on Twitter. Just saying. Okay, thanks. That's a little Bill's mom. Never mind. Forget it.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah, I'm back to my hole. Sorry.
But I mean, again, the whole Lamar Jackson thing I got company, guys. Sorry, what's he doing over here anyway? But this is my new buddy, Derek. This is my new buddy. This is Groot.
Oh.
This is Groot.
Hello, Groot.
He likes to climb on doors and likes to chew on my fingers, but that's okay. He's a good boy. But yeah, the whole Lamar thing. This has been a mess from the get-go. This has been a disaster for the Ravens, and Lamar just needs to basically, in my opinion, hire a fucking agent. That's what he needs to do. He needs to hire an agent.
Hire an agent. Have somebody tell him the tough news that you're not getting the fully guaranteed contract. And the thing is, if you get a fight, like you look at like Josh Allen's contract, I know it's not fully guaranteed, but the way it's set up, how many years do you think he'd have to be bad before the Bills would say, you know what, we're going to cut him? And you're a franchise quarterback. You're an MVP. People are going to stay with you for
taken care of forever in Orchard Park. He's good.
Well, like you said, Derek, he's already put $85 million in his pocket, so and he's set for life.
He's set for life, and Lamar Jackson is not set for life right now. He's only, in terms of, I know $30 million is a lot. I'm not minimizing $30 million,
right.
But you look at what an MVP of the league, who's a face of the franchise, is, and what he's made. It's not much compared to what other people of that stature have made, and he's leaving a lot of money on the table, and he's going to continue to. I mean, what if he sits this year waiting for that guaranteed contract? He's not going to get any of that $30 million.
Right.
And it's not going to put him in any better of a situation. At a certain point, you just got to get beyond the fact that the Browns made a bad contract offer. Get yourself the best possible contract with the most guaranteed money and move on. And stop letting your pride get in the way, because there's 7 or 8 other quarterbacks that are better than Watson that should have fully guaranteed deals. Allen didn't let it get in his way. Mahomes hasn't let it get in his way. Herbert and Burrow aren't going to let it get in their way when they negotiate their contract. He's got to. It's not a hill to die on. It's just not the hill to die on.
Right.
Let's play devil's advocate for a second, though. You're saying that he needs to hire an agent. If you're an agent, do you really want a headache like LaMar Jackson
And his mom.
being
A lot of these guys are headaches, though.
I know it's true. But,
I'm sure Drew Rosenhaus would find room in his schedule for.
I'm sure Drew.
I think 5% of whatever that contract's going to be.
Yeah, but what?
I mean, you'd have to have a conversation.
Get it though.
I think the only way though you would be as agent is you'd have to have a conversation with being like, are you going to get off this hill?
Exactly.
That you're dying on, that you need a fully guaranteed contract. Because if you're only going to authorize me to negotiate a fully guaranteed contract and nothing else, I'm not going to do it, because I'm never going to get paid a commission, because nobody's going to.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Drew Rosenhaus is a mercenary. He'll take anybody, but
That's true.
he's on a hill by himself right now.
All right, let me move on here. The pending sale of the Commanders. What are your thoughts on it? I mean, as far as Dan Snyder being pushed out of the NFL.
I mean, that's one of the worst ownership tenures in the history of the league.
But did anyone do the numbers? He bought the Commanders for like $800 million.
Yes,
and he's selling it for $6 billion.
6.05, in fact, yes.
And this isn't like 50 years ago.
Right.
He didn't buy it. It wasn't passed down to him when he was 20.
Actually, yes.
Like, I saw that.
It's kind of like Jordan. It's kind of like Jordan with the Hornets.
Yeah.
He bought it for $180 million and then sold it for $1.8 billion.
It's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, Dan Snyder's walking away, and he's not going to get any ramifications, because he's going to sell the team via the NFL and nobody's going to go after him, and he's going to walk away with a $5 billion profit. So, I mean, it's unfair, but
that franchise didn't become that valuable because of anything he did to add value to it.
No, because the stadium is terrible. It's falling apart. He inherited a bad stadium to begin with. And it's, I mean, the Commanders have 2 or 3 playoff victories since he took ownership of that team. I mean, he hasn't done anything to enhance the beauty or the what I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but prestige of owning that franchise. What it is its location. It's in DC. That's why it's attractive, because of where it is.
Plus, the franchise has more baggage than Samsonite too. So.
Correct.
Right. But I mean, it's one of the oldest franchises in the league. It has a very storied history. I mean, you look at when he bought it; they weren't that far removed from the Joe Gibbs era, and had won 3 Super Bowls in the '80s and the early '90s, and that was one of the premier franchises in the league at that point. And it's been a disaster. And I think with new ownership, I think they should be able to rekindle some of the.
Well, Magic Johnson's is one of the members of the ownership group, along with the owner of the New Jersey Devils, and I think the Sixers. I think is that. Yeah. He owns the Devils and the Sixers both. He's the primary buyer, and the league meetings are next month, and I am assuming that the league owners will ratify.
I'm sure you'll get 75% of the league owners.
I'm pretty sure that it's going to happen. So, hopefully, I mean, I'm not a big fan of the Commanders / Redskins, whatever you want to call them. I never been. The Washington football team, if you want to go there. But I think new ownership and fresh eyes on that franchise will go a long way. They need a new stadium. The rumors are that they're going to use the old RFK site as to build a new stadium. So that's something that we look for in the future. Now we want to get to the elephant in the room since you're here, Derek.
Sure.
Mr. Aaron Rodgers. The pending trade with the New York Jets has not come to fruition. There has not been any action on this in the 2 months since Aaron has announced he wants to play for the Jets. I don't know if it's the trade details specifically or if it's just Green Bay digging their heels in because they're not getting what they feel they deserve. Specifically, multiple high draft picks over the course of multiple seasons for a guy who may play 1 or 2 more seasons. The pundits have also come out and said that because of what he said in the Pat McAfee show, meaning he was 90% on the side of retirement when he went into his dark room for a week or however long it was, that the Jets are just hemming and hawing on it now because of what he said to Pat McAfee.
The Pat McAfee interview, I don't put much stock in that sort of anything up.
But you gotta love Pat McAfee, man. I love the guy.
Pat McAfee. I listen to a show all the time. The interview, but I mean, to act like that Woody Johnson was going to give the 13th pick up in the draft, and then he listened to the Pat McAfee show, and he's like, "Oh, wait a second, I'm not." Give me a break. But there's 2 things that are holding this up. One is like, go back and look at the Derek Carr situation. His contract, the money was due on February 14th. And so that put the Raiders in a real bind because they had to make a decision whether they're going to pay all that money before free agency or if they were going to, just cut him. Rodgers, his money isn't due until September 1st. Wow. So the Packers aren't carrying any money on the books for next year by keeping him on the roster. And it was set up that way because when they signed him to that contract, I don't think they knew if Rodgers was all in or not. And they wanted to have the entire offseason plus after the draft to trade him so that they could get compensation that they thought was going to be fair. And that's what's going on right now is you got a contract that's 3 years and a lot of money. And so the Packers and the Jets have to figure out how you're going to divide that money up. And then there's also the compensation issue of whether they're going to give the 13th pick in the draft. This isn't exactly the same thing, but what this kind of reminds me of is Randy Moss back in 2007. Remember in that offseason, everybody said Randy was getting traded from the Raiders to the Packers. And that story went for months. From like January, February, March, leading all the way into the draft. And the Packers and the Raiders got hung up because the Packers wanted to give a 4th-round pick. The Raiders wanted a 3rd. And they couldn't come to an agreement. They figured, we'll just wait until after the draft. Belichick swooped in, gave the 3rd-round pick. Moss went to New England. And the Packers were left with nothing. And that's part of the thing that started the Favre divorce. Where
that was the 18-1 season, too, with the Patriots.
Right.
Yes. And so the thing is, the draft is coming up. What happens if Tennessee goes to Green Bay and says, you know what, we'll give you that 1st-round pick? What happens if Indianapolis goes and says that Derek Carr had a no-trade clause? Right. Aaron Rodgers doesn't have a no-trade clause. And, I'm not necessarily convinced he is going to go to the Jets at this point because the Packers are holding the cards, and he's got – if Rodgers retires, he's going to have to pay back the money either to Green Bay or whoever he trade. It's in his financial interest to play, and that's kind of what happened to Favre that year, where he didn't want to go to the Jets. He wanted to go to the Buccaneers, but he got on his plane down to Mississippi, found out he was traded to the Jets, and he showed up with the Jets for a year, and then ended up with the Vikings after that.
Yeah,
I could see that happening here too. So the Jets got to be. I think both teams have to be careful because if the Packers wait too long, the closer it gets to September 1st, the less leverage they have because then there's a deadline. Everybody's filled their quarterback, and it becomes something where they have an expiring asset. But the Jets have to be careful where they sit there and dink around too much on a 1st or a 2nd-round pick in conditional language, and all of a sudden some team swoops in on the day before the draft, and all of a sudden Rodgers is playing for somebody else, and they have Zach Wilson as their quarterback.
Yeah,
that's scary.
I think Aaron Rodgers needs to tune into this Matthew McConaughey show that's coming up. Free his mind a little bit and just keep living.
I I think the most likely scenario is he ends up with the Jets, and I think the most likely scenario is that the Packers get a second-round pick this year, and then the Jets come up on the conditional pick on 2024 based on how they do, how many snaps Rodgers plays, and whether he comes back. I think that is the most likely scenario that's out there. But the Packers are not going to go and just give Aaron Rodgers away to the Jets because they want to give Jordan Love a try. They're going to make sure that they get fair compensation and assets for him.
What do you think the potential for him is?
I read an article, I think it was on Pro Football Talk maybe about a month ago, where one of the Packer beat writers, I can't remember which one, he said if you want to know how a player, what a team thinks of a player, don't ask the offensive players that are practicing them with them, ask the defensive players that are going against them every day. And when Aaron Rodgers was going to take over in 2008, Charles Woodson and the rest of the defense was just raving about how good this guy was in practice. My understanding is the current Packer defensive players have said that he's looked good, but it hasn't been with the same energy as where Aaron Rodgers was in 2008. You got a very small sample size. He looked terrible against Kansas City 2 years ago. He looked really good in 9 throws against the Eagles, but the Packers were way behind and there was soft coverage there. I mean, there just isn't enough of a body of work. I mean, but the Packers have 2 quarterbacks that they've employed for the last 30 years that are top 10 all-time quarterbacks. I mean, the chances that they pull off that for a third straight time.
The trifecta is not something that's going to be in the cards, I don't think.
He could be a Hall of Fame quarterback, and he could be easily the worst of the 3.
Correct.
Because Rodgers and Favre were not just Hall of Fame quarterbacks, top tier, top 10,
they were elite,
legendary name quarterbacks.
Yeah, they're in the elite class.
He's starting out as the worst of the 3.
What's that?
I said he's starting out as the worst of the 3.
Oh, I think Favre probably started off the worst of the 3. He was 250 pounds and had been traded from Atlanta because he drank his way out of it. And I mean, Favre was a complete miracle that ever worked out with everything that was going on there. But I mean, what was a first round pick? I mean, he was raw. He's got great arm talent and he's got great mobility. I mean, he's got some things that he does well. They got a good supporting cast there for him. I think he's going to look good. I mean, the thing is, he can look good and just be terrible compared to what they've had for the last 30 years. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see. But I like his upside, and I think it's the right move because Rodgers, as good as he's been, hasn't been real interested in playing football the last couple of years. And I think that with where things are at, it's time to make this move for him.
Let me ask you this. If Rodgers goes to New York at this stage in his career,
New Jersey.
It's New Jersey.
Whatever. Given what he's been through the last 4 or 5 years, what kind of a relationship do you think he's going to have with the New York media?
It's going to be brutal. It's going to be brutal.
It's going to be great.
John's going to love every minute of it. Yes, he is.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, because he's very polarizing right now. I mean, because you got people in the media that don't like him because of what he does on Pat McAfee's show, what he did on the Joe Rogan podcast. He's got divisive opinions, and New York is the media market capital of the country. And so you might have a number of sports writers that like him there, but you're going to have a number of sports writers that don't. And I think the Green Bay media is so small that, that was something that Favre kind of forgot about when, that even though he was a 3-time MVP of the league and a face of the NFL, I mean, the New York media did not protect him the same way the Green Bay media.
Oh, and the New York media is not going to protect Aaron Rodgers either.
No, they're not.
It's going to be, I mean, you're going to have reporters actually going out and proactively trying to push his buttons. That's what the New York media does.
Especially not on the Giants side.
Yeah. That's what's going to happen is there's going to be some members of the New York press that are going to specifically try to ruffle him and try to get him to say something he doesn't want to say. And that's how the New York media works. That's how it is. So.
And he could go there, and they are still probably going to be the 3rd team in the division because I don't think him going to
I don't like that a lot.
I don't think he makes them better than Buffalo. And I
No.
mean, Miami was a playoff team last year, and if Tua stays healthy this year, they got a lot of weapons and they added pieces. And Belichick, has not had a lot of success there the last 2 of the last 3 years. They made the playoffs the one year, but missed the other two.
Look at the smile on John's face. I love it.
I'm not. It's Derek saying it, not me. So
that's just the division.
He's just soaking it in.
You got Kansas City. You got the Chargers with Herbert. You have Cincinnati. You have. I mean, I don't even know if Rodgers makes them a playoff team there. I really don't.
The Jets have a lot of talent, but it's just it's rough around the edges, and I don't know that Aaron Rodgers is the type of quarterback, specifically after what we've seen the last couple of years, that's going to connect with the young receivers on that team, and get with them in the offseason, go to some undisclosed location and work out with them. That's just not what he does, and so I don't foresee him connecting with those guys. At least for the first season he's there, at least.
Right.
The most frustrating thing to me was he got mad at Green Bay because they wouldn't give him any of the talent that he wanted to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And then he get traded to New York and gives him a wish list of players he wants them to get. Yeah. It's Mercedes Lewis, Randall Cobb, and Alan Lazard. It's like, those are the players you've been playing with that you're mad at in Green Bay. Yeah. And I don't understand what the deal is with Randall Cobb. I mean, why does he need Randall Cobb to go with him wherever he's at? Randall Cobb has been washed for 5 years.
Yeah. Just a side note, guys.
So far, isn't it?
Real quick, just a side note. I can't get a hold of Ron, so I don't know if he's coming or not. Okay. He says I'm there. See you, but I'm not in the room yet. So give me a second. See,
okay.
I don't know where he's at. I can't see him. I don't know why I can't see him, but he says he's there. So we'll see if he's coming or not. Anyway, it is what it is. Hang on a second. Let me get with him real quick. Oh.
And welcome to Technical Expertise with Scott Wright.
I gave him the wrong link. Excuse me. Second here. I gave him the Vim link instead of our link. So
that's okay. Vim needs some love too, man. I mean, good crowd in Vim. What's going on, Vim?
Yeah, I know, Vim.
Big shout out to DDR Freak too.
Yes,
I'm okay with my team for now. I'm not.
What's that, sir?
Waiting to see what happens with Purdy.
Oh, did everyone see D-Hop's reaction when he had a facial reaction to the Bills?
He doesn't want to raise. Yes, I did see that.
No, did you see it? Like someone asked him, you can't say who you want to get traded to, but if you were to be traded to these teams, show us your facial expression. And it's like the Patriots, he's like, and then they say the Bills, he's like, I'm like, sign him now. Thank you. Okay. That'd be so awesome.
What do you guys think of the draft as far as which of these quarterbacks?
Yeah, which quarterback?
I'm reading Bryce Young's going to be the first quarterback taken. I don't know if he should be the first quarterback taken.
The guy is 5'10" and 200 pounds soaking wet. I mean, come on. Seriously?
Yeah. When he was in that picture with what's the lady from ESPN? Mima Kunis? Mia Kimes, yeah. When he was in the picture with her, it's like they look like they're the same size.
She was wearing heels.
I don't care what she was wearing. They looked like they were the same size.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome in Mr. Ron Gallo.
Oh, I get to change my hat. Please hold.
He's going to change hats. Mr. Gallo, welcome to the show. Good to see you, sir. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
As you can see, we have Mr. Derek Lofland with us. He's sporting his Chicago Blackhawks gear. And since we're now in the hockey segment, first I'm going to ask Derek, Jonathan Toews is not going to be re-signed with the Chicago Blackhawks after multiple, I don't know how many years he was with the Blackhawks, but I guess
16
years with the Blackhawks.
Awesome.
And they have publicly announced he is not going to be re-signed. He says he has no hard feelings. What are your thoughts on the Blackhawks not re-signing Jonathan Toews? You think it's because it's an age issue, or is it just as a money issue? What's going on there?
It's an age issue and it's a health issue, and they're in rebuild. They've been trying to accumulate as many young assets. And like they said, they could bring it back for the rebuild next year, but then these younger guys are going to be deferring to him. And it's time for new leaders among the players to usher in the next era of Blackhawks hockey. What makes me sad is I was never really a hockey fan growing up. And then when I moved to Chicago, that's when they had their rebirth with Kane and Keith and Towes and all those guys. And I had so much fun watching those Stanley Cup runs. I mean, that period of about 5 years there where they won 3 cups, that series against the Kings that went 7 games was probably one of the best hockey series of the last 20 years, I would say. I mean, they were a lot of fun and gave Chicago a lot of joy. And they made the playoffs the one year with the pandemic when they had all the teams get in and they beat Edmonton and then lost in the second round, and they just haven't been
Sorry, John.
Didn't count.
It didn't count.
It's sad to me because all the guys that introduced me to hockey that are the reason I bought all the Blackhawks apparel I have, none of them are going to be there anymore, and
they're all gone.
They're all gone. So hopefully they can make good with these draft picks and in a couple of years be ready to make the playoffs again. But I mean, they needed to start trading assets because they've been doing this for the last couple of years where they've been trying to do half a rebuild and half keep the band together, and it hasn't really had good results.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Ron? I mean, it's an end of an era in Chicago.
Well, I might as well just sign off. Derek got it all. Good job, Derek, because, I mean, it's so true. I mean, he's 34 years old right now. Really, the Chicago Blackhawks have not been doing much since 2017. Yeah, they made it into the postseason during the COVID year. But, the thing is that you look at Jonathan Toews, and Derek touched on some of those big players, Patrick Kane and Duncan Keith, and all of those big players for the Chicago Blackhawks. Jonathan Toews comes in and he starts wearing a letter in his very first year in 2007, 2008. He was the assistant captain. They didn't make it to the postseason that year, but the following year they do, and they make it all the way. They end up winning the Stanley Cup. And as Derek mentioned, the next 5 years were banner years for the Chicago Blackhawks, and especially Jonathan Toews. And you think about his biggest year was 2009, 2010. He gets the Stanley Cup. He gets the Olympic gold medal. He's named to the Olympic All-Star team. He's named the best forward for the Olympics. Picks up the most assists in the Olympics, the best plus-minus rating. Of course, he gets the Stanley Cup to go along with that. He gets the Conn Smythe Trophy. So 2009, 2010 was definitely his biggest year. Not the only big year, but certainly his biggest year. Another Stanley Cup, wins a couple of Selke trophies along the way. And again, you get to 2017, 2018, and the wheels on the bus start falling off the Chicago Blackhawks, and they go into the retooling, the rebuilding, the re-energizing of the stands and all the rest of it. And Jonathan Toews has been the Mr. Consistent of the Chicago Blackhawks all the way through that for 16 seasons. It's tough. I mean, how do you do that? You make a public acknowledgement that he is the lifeblood of the Chicago Blackhawks for the past 16 years, but we're going to cut him loose and let him go and do what he wants to do and not re-sign him. So, yeah, he's 34 years old, and you have to start thinking that you're getting close to that period of time where retirement is definitely something you want to seriously consider. Do you want to go out? It's hard to go out at the top anymore when your team hasn't done anything in the last 5 years. Do you kind of go out here while you still got that name, or do you try and build it up and risk, becoming a little bit lower down the totem pole, if you will? Certainly, I think that he's still got a couple of years left in him. His 35th birthday is coming up at the end of the month on April the 29th. And it's not unreasonable to think that Jonathan Toews can't play another season or 2 seasons in the NHL, especially if he ends up on a decent team.
Well, I think the big issue for trading him was the health issues, because I think if he hadn't had the health issues the last couple of years, they probably could have moved him at the trade deadline and got some assets. I think that was kind of the reason he ended up sticking through the rest of this year, is they weren't going to get any good offers where he was going to bring him any capital anyway. So he had more value as being a leader in that locker room for the last part of this year rather than any trade capital he would have got him.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you think about Patrick Kane getting traded away as well. Why doesn't Jonathan Toews get traded away? Health issues, definitely something to consider. But the other thing is that I look at Patrick Kane missing out on the last couple of regular season games because of injuries. I look at Jonathan Toews being able to play right through to the end of the season. But, yeah, he's had his injury woes as well. I think that's just kind of what was happening in Chicago. They were leaning a little too hard on the elder statesmen of that team, and it put just too much pressure and put those players in vulnerable positions. And yeah, they come out of it injured. So if you're going to keep him around for the leadership, make sure you're keeping him around for the leadership, but not leaning on him to be the point producer.
Right. Yep. Okay. All right.
Who does Duncan Keith play for now?
He's retired.
Works for the Oilers.
He's retired?
Yeah, he retired, but he works for the Oilers.
Okay.
All right, moving on. We're going to get into the playoff situation here, Ron. The playoffs start tomorrow night.
I think, I mean, yes, the playoffs start tomorrow night, but I think some of the bigger news still was some of what happened within the 36 hours after the regular season came to an end. Pittsburgh has retooled their entire upper office.
Their office got like totally canned.
Yeah, I mean, Brian Burke is gone. Ron Hextall is gone. I've always had a problem with Ron Hextall being inside the Pittsburgh Penguins office anyways. He's a Philadelphia Flyer, in my opinion.
Right.
You know, there's certainly others that the coaches have been fired, but the most significant office change, if you will, came with the Pittsburgh Penguins. 16 seasons in the postseason. Every year that Jonathan Toews played in the NHL, so did the Pittsburgh Penguins make it to the postseason, except this year. This is the first year it didn't happen. So, you know, like certainly that's something to think about. Is there talks about Sidney? No, Sidney Crosby's not going anywhere. Evgeny Malkin's not going anywhere. You know, there's three core players on that Pittsburgh Penguins that Mario Lemieux and the office staff are not going to part ways with. But certainly, you know, Pittsburgh Penguins have fallen on a little bit of tough times here in the last little while as well. So certainly, as much as you look at the 16 teams that are making it to the postseason, you have to look at the 16 teams that aren't making it to the postseason. Right. And ask the question of why. Like, what happened? Is there something that can be done? Should they have made the postseason, or shouldn't they have? I mean,
well, Calgary's a toxic waste dump.
Calgary's a waste of
hockey,
so we don't care about Calgary. You know,
the kid, there's no Ovi this year.
Yeah, there's such unison.
Yeah, but again, I mean, I just heard Ken mention Ovi. I mean, there's the Washington Capitals. You know, the Washington Capitals, that's a little bit of a surprise, and I think that hurts. Yeah. You know, a team that has had some high highs in recent years, and now all of a sudden struggling with some really low lows.
Who doesn't love Ovechkin? Ovechkin's one of the great characters in the NHL to begin with.
Ovechkin is, you either love to hate him or hate to love him, one or the other. So.
Worth the price of admission. I said
worth the price of admission. You're right, John. Yes.
I paid every time Ovechkin came to Edmonton. I wanted to see him. He's amazing live. Same with Connor. Yeah. But it's like those are the two guys that like you pay your ticket price and you're just going to be like jaw on the floor because they're just amazing to watch.
I'm an Ovi fan. I looked at regular season tickets this year, and they're like, you know, in the 300 section of the Amalie Arena, which is way at the top. They're $200. There's no way I'm paying $200 to go to a hockey game. I can't.
$200. That's cheap in Canada, man.
Yeah, I mean, that's cheap.
I mean, a lot of times, John can attest to this. A lot of times, it is cheaper for a Canadian to fly to an American destination to watch a team play. That means that the ticket price in Canada is the equivalent or more so than airfare plus the ticket in the
plus hotel sometimes.
Yeah, plus hotels.
Well,
And
that's
car
what
rentals.
that's what the Oilers do. Like the fans will go down to Phoenix, or they'll go down to even like LA or Anaheim or something like that. Super cheap, like
Yep.
bargain basement prices, and like trying to get into Rogers Place here is stupid. It's like, like you're looking nosebleeds is like $250 American
Jesus.
for nosebleeds. I mean,
Yeah.
I wouldn't even want to look at the price for the playoffs tomorrow. Like it's going to be hundreds, if not thousands. Like just stupid.
Oh,
Yeah.
100%.
I
100%.
miss the days. I mean, what used to be my company had box seats or had club seats for the Lightning, and I got to go to 2 games without having to fork out a dime, and it was great. But now we no longer have those tickets, so I'm just like, I can't afford to go to a hockey game. I wish I could, but I can't.
Last time I went to a playoff game, I was actually working covering it, so
Yeah.
I've never been one as a spectator.
I mean, hockey's getting as expensive to go see as NFL.
Yes,
it really is. It's getting expensive to see. I mean, especially when you got a team as popular in Tampa as the Lightning. I mean, they're successful. They're good. They're playoff contenders every single year, and just the pricing for tickets are just astronomical. I'm like, oh my god.
Are they going to get smoked by the Leafs, though? That's the question.
And I was going to ask Ron. I'm looking at the matchups for the first round of the playoffs. I'm looking at the Islanders and the Hurricanes, the Panthers in Boston, which, God, Boston scares the hell out of me. I don't know. What do you think about Boston?
Boston
Ron?
should scare the hell out of everybody, to be honest
Right.
with you.
Yeah.
So, anyways, we've had this discussion about the President's Trophy and the issues that the President's Trophy winner has. Well, somebody did some number crunching ever since the President's Trophy started being awarded some 28 years ago, since it's actually more than that, probably. Yeah, so 1985, 1986 was the first time that there was a President's Trophy. Since then, the President's Trophy team has won the Stanley Cup the most times, 8. The second most is the team that has finished 4th in the NHL. They've won it 6 times. A second place team has won it 4. A 7th place team has won it 4 times, and a 3rd place team has won it 3 times, and the others have all won it twice. What's interesting is that the Boston Bruins, and we always talk about the curse of the President's Trophy, because I mean it's a bitter pill when we talk to Scott because of what happened to the Tampa Bay Lightning when they were swept.
Probably on this show because it happened to the Lightning, and these guys never fail to give me shit about the Lightning losing in 4 straight to the Columbus Blue Jackets.
We would never do that. We would never do that. What do you?
We would never allow you to
Never.
forget that.
I will never live that down. They will never forget it.
So, anyways, where I want to go with this is the center of the universe in Canada, and I know John knows where I'm going with this, but the center of the universe in Canada is Toronto. And Toronto finished 4th in the NHL this year. 4th. And so the interesting thing is that now a lot of people are looking at that little stat that I told you about, where the President's Cup trophy winner has won the Stanley Cup 8 times, and Toronto is in 4th place, where the 4th place team has won it 6 times.
But Toronto can't get out of the first round. They've never. It's
true. It's true. But honestly, I believe this is the year that Toronto makes it out of the first round.
Just don't do this
but
to me, Ron.
They're going to end up meeting the Boston Bruins in the second round, and guess what's going to happen?
You're killing me, Ron.
I know.
Who was that ended the Tampa Bay Rays winning streak the other day?
That was the Red Sox. Thank you very much. That would be the Red Sox. I mean, sorry, it would be the Toronto Blue Jays. Excuse me, the Blue Jays. Yeah,
the Blue Jays. So in the East, yes, the Boston Bruins have won the President's Cup trophy. They've set records for the amount of points, the number of games won in a regular season, and they get to meet the lowly Florida Panthers, who squeaked in simply because the Pittsburgh Penguins lost to the Chicago Blackhawks 5-2.
Which they should not have done, but that's okay.
No. So anyways, Florida makes
Sorry,
it
Derek.
in.
Yeah, no.
I don't see Florida being the Cinderella team that the Los Angeles Kings were a number of years ago, where they snuck in and ended up winning the Stanley Cup. I don't see Florida Panthers getting past the Boston Bruins. In fact, I'm going to call a sweep. It's the only series that I'm going to see a sweep or call a sweep is the Boston Bruins over the Florida Panthers. The Toronto Maple Leafs, they're going to need a couple of extra games. My bigger concern with the Toronto Maple Leafs is what are they going to do between the pipes? They've got Samsonov right now, but if Samsonov gets hurt, who do they go to? They don't have Matt Murray.
They Bony driver.
Hey.
Yeah.
Enough.
Yeah.
Like seriously.
There is the Zamboni driver. So, you know, the thing is that there's going to be no excuses, and there's always excuses, but there's going to be no excuses for the Toronto Maple Leafs not to get past the Tampa Bay Lightning. The thing that I am going to say before I leave that series, and this is more so that I kind of ease the pain that Scott might be feeling, is that the Tampa Bay Lightning have a way of getting into the postseason and going in as almost that underdog team and all of a sudden turning it on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the scary thing for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and that's why I say I'm a little bit worried about who's between the pipes for the Toronto Maple Leafs, because the Tampa Bay Lightning just have a way of doing it. They're not sneaking in, but yes, they're sneaking in as not the expected winner, but more of an underdog.
Well, they're also limping into the playoffs because they're the last couple of weeks of the season, they've lost games they should have won. Vasilevsky has not been the stellar goaltender he has been in the past, but for whatever reason, the big cat, as they call him, I guess is what they call him, has an ability to flip a switch once the playoffs begin, and he becomes the elite goaltender that he is. We'll
see if it happens again this year. I don't know that it can, but certainly, I mean, that is something that you have to keep in the back of your mind if you're a Toronto Maple Leafs fan.
I feel that Vasilevsky is the key to the Bolts moving on to the second round. I think if he can turn that switch and come up with some stellar games, I think the Bolts will move on. But I'm not as confident in this team as I was in them last year. But we'll see. We'll see. Well, as long as you've got Stamkos and Kucherov and Hedman in the lineup, there's always a chance.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on to the – sorry, who's healthy?
What's that, Ken?
I asked him if Stamkos is it. I asked him
Stamkos is healthy, and believe it or not, Kucherov made it through the whole season without getting injured, believe it or not. So, yes.
Yeah. No, I think Stat is doing fine. I wanted to just touch on the Metropolitan Division, if I could. Carolina Hurricanes comes in as, you know, strong team. I'm going with the underdog in this series. The New York Islanders have been doing something, especially in front of their hometown fans, that you kind of see, maybe not a Cinderella story, but you definitely see the strength of that team and how they're able to gel. And to me, the New York Islanders kind of feel like the Tampa Bay Lightning a couple of years ago. They're a team that have made it into the postseason. Yes, they've come in as a wild card spot, but they've been doing everything right. They've been on the outside looking in since January, and they are one of the stronger teams in the last 3 months of the regular season. So I'm going with the New York Islanders to take the Carolina Hurricanes. And then the second round is going to end up being the Battle of New York, because I think that the Rangers are going to get past the New Jersey Devils. The Devils maybe have a couple of extra assets that the Rangers don't have, but there's something about the Broad Street Bullies there's just something about the Madison Square Gardens and the New York Rangers and how they play together. And every time I've watched them, which is not very often because I'm on the West Coast of North America, but every time I've watched the New York Rangers, Zibanejad has been their MVP.
What about the West? What about the Western Conference? Who do you see in the Western Conference?
So the Western Conference, I'm going to start obviously with the team that ends up finishing on the upper deck. The Vegas Golden Knights do it again. They come out as the Pacific Division and Western Conference champions, and they'll get to meet the Winnipeg Jets, who were able to kind of pull away from the Calgary Flames in the last 3 games of the regular season. The Seattle Kraken, they did a much better job down the stretch. So I'll touch with them in a second. But the Winnipeg Jets, they have a great goaltender in Hellebuck. The problem is that they are missing the mark everywhere else where it matters. I don't know if it's selfish play or if it's just a case of the systems are not working, in which case Rick Bowness is not going to be the head coach of the Winnipeg Jets if they lose in the first round to the Vegas Golden Knights, which I'm predicting.
What about LA? Let's go ahead with the elephant in the room, LA and Edmonton.
That's not an elephant in the room. This is the real deal. The Edmonton Oilers, the Edmonton Oilers, Connor McDavid has a chip on his shoulder, but it's not just Connor McDavid. It's that entire team. It's from top to bottom. They want to meet the Colorado Avalanche in the Western Conference Finals, which would be the 3rd round. But they're not going to sweep the Los Angeles Kings, but they are going to steamroll that team. The Los Angeles Kings just don't have that depth that the Edmonton Oilers have. They don't have the firepower that the Edmonton Oilers have. I don't care how many points that the Boston Bruins have in the regular season. I don't care that the Toronto Maple Leafs finished 4th. Neither one of those 2 teams have the firepower that the Edmonton Oilers have.
God, look at Jon. He's just
dude. I'm trying to do the meme. Dude, do you know the Kermit the Frog meme?
Yes.
That's what I'm doing right now.
Yeah. So Edmonton Oilers, Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl. I mean, you look at those top. Look, they don't just have a top 2 line. They have top 3 lines. That 4th line can still produce as well. They don't just have a top 2 defensive pairing. They've probably got a solid 5-man defensive unit, and their goaltending has been rock solid. Edmonton definitely going through to the 2nd round. Let's jump over to the other wild card team, the Seattle Kraken. And the Colorado Avalanche.
Overmatched against Colorado. I'm sorry, the Kraken are overmatched against the Avalanche. I think the Avalanche is that much better than they are.
They are, but the Avalanche are going into the postseason missing a very key component with Cale Makar. I think for that reason, the Seattle Kraken can win a couple of games and maybe put a scare into the Colorado Avalanche, but I don't think that they're going to get past them. I am going to say Colorado in 6. And then a series that could go 7 games is the Minnesota Wild and the Dallas Stars. The difference here is whether or not Marc-Andre Fleury can be the Fleury of the past and the goaltender that just always seems to get his team into the postseason and then ends up carrying them through to a couple of extra rounds. So we'll see what Marc-Andre Fleury can do with the Minnesota Wild over the Dallas Stars. I know Ken is a diehard Dallas Stars fan. I just don't see that the Dallas Stars have enough depth to be able to carry that through.
We shall see.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Minnesota's are playing really good at the end of the season, so it's going to be an interesting series. It really is.
We've had at least 2 or 3 goals in the last few games from our 4th line. So.
Yep. No, so if I go a little bit deeper into my predictions, obviously it's Boston, Toronto in the 2nd round. Boston advances. It's the Battle of New York. The Rangers advance, which means Boston and the Rangers in the Eastern Conference Final. Boston advance on that.
That would be a fun series. Boston and the
Rangers. 100%. Yeah. So I'm going with Boston to come out of the East to be into the Stanley Cup. In the West, Edmonton is going to be over the Vegas Golden Knights in the 2nd round. Colorado is going to be over Minnesota in the 2nd round, which is going to put a rematch to last year's Western Conference Final, Edmonton and Colorado. Edmonton is going to advance. That means the Stanley Cup Finals will be Edmonton Oilers and the Boston Bruins. And I'll tell you now.
That would also be a fun series to watch. Yes,
exactly. And that is going to be a 50-50 split no matter who you talk to. Anybody could see either team win, but I'm going to have to go with the Canadian favorite team here, the Edmonton Oilers, for winning the Stanley Cup in 2023.
John likes that prediction, I'm sure. Yes.
Well, just do the history of the last time that the Oilers and the Bruins met in the Stanley Cup final, and
Yes.
Yep. Yep. I mean, I'll say this about the Boston Bruins. I mean, I'll never, ever forget what happened in 2011. Vancouver Canucks up 3-0 over the Boston Bruins, and the Bruins come back and win that one 4 straight and absolutely destroyed the city of Vancouver.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were rioting. Yeah, they burned the city down. Yes, I remember that. Yes.
Yeah, it was classy. Great.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Good stuff.
Speaking of classy,
I love your predictions, sir.
Thank
I
you.
just needed Derek to say the Bills are going to win the Super Bowl this year too, and it would have been it would have been great. The best show of the year.
Absolutely.
All
right.
All right, guys, we're at 8:30. It was a great show. I want to thank Derek and Ron for joining us tonight. It was great. Derek, again, I know you're going to be out of town and on the road, but you're welcome to join us for the draft show Thursday. Not this Thursday, but the following Thursday. Good luck and drive safe going to Nova Scotia, eh? I know that was terrible. That was awful. My God.
Oh,
It's okay. He needs to get some lobster.
Let me apologize to my Canadian friend on my accent. I apologize.
Get them in a Molson.
on your butcher job that you just did.
I just destroyed the Canadian accent, and I apologize to both Ron and John for that.
That's okay.
Anyway, it was a great show, guys.
The border.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. We appreciate it. You're always welcome. You got the chat and Facebook. Whenever you want to come on, just let us know. Chat, hit us up, and we'll bring you on the show. With that being said, we will be back again next Sunday at 7:30 Eastern Time for the Sports Nerds. Give us a follow on Facebook. Give us a follow on my Twitter account as well. And we are going to be out of here. Thanks again on behalf of my co-host, Mr. Ken, Who Were Them Cowboys, Mr. Eliot Big E Lamba, and Mr. John G. Bills Mafia Olson. Derek Lofland, lifelong Blackhawks fan and Green Bay Packers fan, and Mr. Ron Gallo, of course, Mr. Montreal Canadiens himself. Have a great week, and we are out. Eliot, please hit the outro.
Well, there you have it, Nerd Nation. Another Sunday
You're
episode
driving
of the
a
Sports
lid,
Nerd
too.
Show in the books, and we are still alive to tell about it. Now, on behalf of our host, Scott, the Sports Nerd, right? And his co-host, John Olson, Ken Coslow, lovable members in the Ramp Pack, and yes, me, Big E, the entire pack would once again like to thank you all for participating with us in the best 90 minutes of Sports Smack Talk on the web today. So until next Sunday night, dear nation, we would like to leave you with a quick PSA. Please stay safe. Please practice social distancing, and for heaven's sake, please wear a damn mask. You all just got hit with a pack rant from the Ramp Pack, and with that, fellas, we are